All right, all right. Good evening, South Euclid United Church of Christ. Good evening out there in digital land. Welcome to the final installment, at least this time around, of Echo. Echo is the series that we are providing here at South Euclid United Church of Christ as we talk to kind of echo Sunday sermon. We've been preaching through a sermon series on anxiety entitled Juggle the Struggle, Thriving in the Age of Anxiety. And because this is such a critical topic and we wanted to be great stewards of this subject, we felt it really important that after preaching on Sunday to have this dialogue and discussion. Probably had we been in regular church, we simply would have just had counselors available on hand at the end of every service, but trying to think outside the box, trying to be creative in these COVID streets. Tonight, we bring to you Echo. The last couple of weeks, if you've been following our discussion, has been one that is indeed lively. We started off at the top with Reverend Raquel Gill, my baby sister in ministry, and talked about why churches historically have been so resistant to counseling beyond pastoral counseling with just the senior pastor. And then we moved into a conversation with Reverend Gina Moore, powerful, still resonating with me, on depression and the Bible, looking very closely at how depression manifests. And we talked a lot about what it means to be whole. And so there was a deep conversation. Then we moved from that theological basis into real life praxis with my brother and our great friend here at South Euclid, Archie Green. Archie is a mental health advocate and talked about his own story, his own struggle with anxiety, depression, and certainly as a person of faith. Then we moved into me bringing in my therapist. I kept telling y'all I got a therapist, Dr. Josephine Ridley, who has been helping me the last 9 years to navigate this thing called life and ministry. She specializes in anxiety. And we got to understand, which will be helpful even as we discuss tonight, the wide range of breadth and depth of anxiety. There are no neatly checked boxes here. And we'll give you our disclaimer in a minute so that you're mindful of those. And then last week, we had with us Eric King, talk to us about the mental health of boys and men. While we were looking at everybody, our specificity was to Black men. We had a phenomenal time. And so we did the brothers, we did the bros. And so tonight I've got my soror, Dr. Tyffani Dent with us. We're going to look at the mental health of girls and of women. We're so thankful Dr. Dent is with us. She just is a shining bright star. She's written books, she teaches seminars, she consults, she gets everybody and their edges together. And so we are excited to have her with us tonight, as women and girls, African American in particular, are her specialty, and also one who deals with mental health in the midst of national crisis, which in fact, many of you know, we are currently facing. And so tonight, we're going to jump in. So if you are with us on Facebook or on YouTube, would you like, click, share, subscribe, follow, do all that stuff that they tell me I'm supposed to tell y'all to do. Call your friend, call your girlfriend. This would be a great, if you're going to hang out with your girls tomorrow night, loop them into this. You can continue that conversation over a glass of wine or however you flow in your house. Amen. Praise the Lord, saints. But be with us tonight. We always remind you, listen, this is for to bring value to your life. We're sharing from knowledge, from experience, but you should always consult your doctor. You should always consult your healthcare provider. You should always, always, always do that in conversation, because we're just here tonight sharing as two women what our experiences are. Amen. Well, Dr. Dent.
Hello.
Welcome, 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 welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Is there anything else? I mean, I gave you a little introduction. Your bio is long, your CV is extensive, but is there anything else you'd like the people to know about you that perhaps I did not mention?
I don't think so. I think you did an amazing job. I love it. Thank you.
Amen. Very good. Very good. Very good. So again, shout out to all of our folks who are watching. So although this is I think this is our sixth or seventh conversation. But I want to begin tonight with the same question I've asked every person that we've had on. Dr. Dent, I think you tell us where you grew up. I don't think it was in Cleveland, right? Like a little maybe smaller town. No?
A lot smaller.
Okay. Okay.
I grew up in Lima, Ohio.
Okay, Lima. Good old Lima. Okay. So shout out to Chanel and her people. So tell us about growing up in Lima, your family system, whatever that looked like. Did y'all know about counseling? Did you talk about counseling? Was that something that you explored? We just want to kind of hear your journey of where this came to be in your life and as a trusted method. I assume not only as you extend it to others, but seemingly as you explore it yourself.
I think like most Black families, counseling was not something you talked about. Even the idea of mental health was not something that you addressed. If anything, it was, they're touched. Defined behaviors that later on you realize as you grow up that people were depressed, they had anxiety, but we would just talk about the behavior, but not actually name what was going on. I think the first time that I actually encountered counseling was when I was in middle school and was sent to counseling. That lasted one session. Because I think one of the things, it was not viewed as valuable. And the process of what counseling is, that it's supposed to be this space where as a parent, you know what you need to know for safety of your child, but it also has to be a place where they can be vulnerable. And so for my parents, getting this whole write-up of detail by detail what happened in the session was something that didn't. And so it just ended, which made me become really intrigued with what counseling should be about.
Amen. Amen. That's really helpful. So thank you. You're not only Dr. Dent, you also are a wife and a mother. I think that's relevant in part to the conversation we're going to have tonight. So you get the managing of hats, right? As a working mom, I don't know if your children, I'm sure we'll learn tonight, are remote or not remote and how that works. But when you look at the general climate right now of our nation, it is my suspicion that anxiety is up and on edge, that even depression, as people are not able to freely come and go. And we shared a couple weeks ago, again, this is a broad topic, but can you talk a little bit about what are you just generally seeing in women and in girls? And if you want to speak specifically to African-American women, perfectly fine. What are you seeing right now as you look at COVID, political environment, Black Lives Matter, food shortage, economic collapse? Talk to us about what we're seeing.
I think all of those, I'm seeing heightened stress. And people are actually beginning to acknowledge that this is stressful, where before we as a people have kind of been taught that you just push through and you keep it moving. And because everything's piling on top of each other, we're experiencing the trauma related to racial stress and racial injustice. And I always frame it as this is traumatic because we're actually seeing it broadcast on TV and on our social media feeds. People are worried about health, and specifically within our community, some of the things that we've been dealing with even before now: food shortages in our community, transportation, medical care not available, all of the things that exacerbate the impact of a pandemic, we are experiencing it. So I'm having people reach out more about stress, work-life balance doesn't exist anyway, as we know as parents. But now when you're expected to work from home, educate your children at the same time, all of these worlds are colliding at once, and you're trying to figure out, how do I navigate? And then a lot of our outlets are gone. Like you said, like I can go and I'm going to get away. I'm going to go on vacation. I'm going to do self-care and go get my nails done. I'm going to go to brunch with my friends. I'm going to do all of these things to try to manage this. And a lot of those aren't available right now. And so we're dealing with not having the outlets. Different stressors that we're used to having one at a time are now happening all at the same time. So, and we're also seeing for those who are already experiencing issues with depression, this is also some of the things that you do. We know that behaviorally, you'll be asked to exercise more. You'll be asked to not isolate yourself. And those things are not available. Your gyms are closed. Isolating yourself is what we're being told to do. So feelings of hopelessness are happening in this environment as well. But the only good thing is that we're actually talking about it now. Like, I'm hearing more from Black women, more from girls who are saying that this is tough. This is tougher than I'm used to, and are seeking support in different arenas, which is the only helpful thing about this.
Amen. That's really good. That's really good. As you talk about that, it's funny. My sister, who is a federal prosecutor, like sent me a meme couple at the start of this. Like, so now we were already as women already overtaxed with work, already overtaxed with, in particular to our culture, caretaking responsibilities, right? No Black woman just takes care of just herself. She's helping with her mama, her sister, her cousins, her friends, her aunties, her nieces and nephews. And you put homeschooling on top of this, right? That now I've got to manage all of that and whatever my other responsibilities are. I mean, it's interesting too, because prior to all of this, there were more and more articles emerging about how women were already working almost triple time to men when you put in all of those responsibilities, right? What also comes to mind in this is single parents, single mothers in particular, who were already doing it all on their own. What are we seeing? Are you seeing anything extra in single mothers, or is it just all, it don't matter if you got help or not? It's just,
I think it always matters the less help you have. I think we do know that in society, for women who are in heterosexual relationships specifically, the distribution of labor is not equitable by any stretch of the imagination. So you're already doing more. But when we're looking at single mothers specifically who have always been doing it, a lot often by themselves, at least on a daily basis in their household, even those supports that you relied on where you may switch off with another parent in these days of COVID, it's, do we take the risk of now doing that switch off if we're trying to maintain our children in the home? So even those other outside supports that you had are not as readily available to you. And again, those outlets, we are people and we are social animals. We need connection. And so now we're even, as a single parent, you're even more isolated because you're at home with your children. And especially when you're trying to follow these guidelines that have been set up for us. So you can't switch your children off with other people. You can't get much of a break. If you had older parents that before took care of your kids, you're now worried for them because of exposure. And we know the rate of actually causing more harm is more so when you're elderly. So that becomes an issue as well.
Yeah. Okay. This is good. So let's kind of start off with girls and we'll just kind of work our way up. We'll talk a little bit about, I am as a pastor, and I would say I inherit all of these wonderful people, are worried about what I'm just calling layered trauma. Stop school in the middle of the year. If you have an only child, issues of socialization come in. If you have multiple children, you're trying to you got to do double of everything, right? We're also looking at a generation that literally is witnessing real death. Death is no longer acted out, but due to social media, we saw George Floyd die. We see the protests, the erupting violence. Tell me, what are we seeing in children? And with that, what do we need to be mindful of? What do we need to look for in our young girls? And you can do it adolescent and then teen if you want, however you want to approach that.
I think the first thing that we need to recognize is that we are dealing with issues of grief and loss. with some of our children, because a lot of the milestones that children are looking forward to, they didn't get to experience this year. Everything just stopped. And so graduations and birthday parties and football games and things that we may say, oh, you'll have another one. It doesn't really matter. These were significant events they were looking forward to, and they're grieving the loss of these events and not knowing when they're going to be able to experience them again, because we're not telling them there's an end date. So there's this uncertainty about how long this is going to go on. What is this going to mean for my life moving forward? We talk about new normal, but this is not normal. And so they're dealing specifically, when we're talking about the pandemic aspect of it, they've lost so much in this year that they're not going to be able to get back. And at times as adults, we minimize that because we're like, oh, you'll have another graduation. You'll have we'll do a bigger birthday next year, versus saying, these are things you can never get back, and it's sad, and we have to allow you that room to talk about it and to be upset about it because you're grieving. So I think that's one of the things that we've been dealing with specifically with the pandemic. When it comes to social injustice, social unrest, we're not new to this as a people, specifically Black folks, but it being broadcast is new. And I think the pandemic has impacted that because we're home. So we're more likely to see things on media, and we can't turn it off and escape from it because it's constant. So I think one of the things we're exposing our children to, either by choice or just by force, because it's everywhere, is trauma. And it's trauma specifically for Black girls and Black folks that is personal, because there are people who look like you. And some of the situations are so just insignificant that makes it more significant that it's happening. It's like you're doing stuff that's not, you were breaking up a fight. You were sleeping in your bed. There are things.
You were walking home from the store,
walking home with the Skittles. I mean, it's just, you're doing, just living, you're just living, and your just existence is making people view you as someone that they can kill. And then I think, you also are being exposed to the responses of people justifying your death and justifying the death of people who look like you. And so then we have to deal with the fear of we always have these rules about safety, but it's when things are happening that absolutely make no sense, that go against the rules of safety, it makes it very hard to have those conversations and be able to reinforce in your children that they are safe. And then you also have, with our teenagers specifically, issues of righteous anger, some feelings of helplessness, wanting to identify, what can I do? Because I need to do something. And then us as adults being fearful and trying to keep them from doing something, but also knowing that one of the ways that we deal with situations is to not feel helpless and to feel like we're actually making a change, and trying to identify for our teens, what does that look like? How can you, because I did this thing called multifaceted resistance. One for kids, one for teens. Like, these are the things as parents you can do in this moment when your children are saying, I need to do something, that addresses where they are in terms of their age, and safety.
So that does bring me, I want to bring it a little more tangible. How we know that, like, when children are younger, they don't always have the language capacity to articulate how they feel. Sometimes as they get older into their teenage years, they kind of want privacy. They don't want to process, How do you talk with your daughters? How do we learned last week from Eric, it was great, normalizing communication. We did that with boys. How do we do that with girls?
Girls is something. I think the thing is that society has made it a little bit more normal for girls to verbalize their feelings than we do for boys. For boys, it is one of the, you just suck it up, you handle it. Girls are taught more so that communication is acceptable. I think one of the things that happens is if my children have seen something that's come on the news or whatever, I'll ask them about their thoughts about it, and we'll have a conversation. Other times, if you open the door and just say something like, I haven't seen my friends in a long time. I'm like, wow, that's got to be hard for you. I'm sure you're missing them. And so sometimes it's actually emotional identification, kind of saying that these are feelings like, angry about that, or that would hurt my feelings, or I would be scared. So kind of putting some possible emotions that they may be experiencing that they're not sure how to process it that way. Is often helpful, especially with the younger kids. When younger kids are saying like, I haven't seen grandma in forever. And I always saw grandma. And it's like, this must be really sad for you that you're not getting to see your grandma. And so giving them those words and letting them know that that's understandable. And this is not a place in which they should be existing. And for older kids, kind of starting the dialogue. Like I know if you're watching the news with me, or if we're in the car and something comes on, we talk about it. And normalize that this is not how the world is supposed to be, but it is, and that it's happening at no fault of your own.
That's good. That's good. That's good. As we now our children are pretty much all back in school. I mean, my son is younger, but have your daughter's schools talked about any of this? And if so, are they talking about it in a way that makes you comfortable as a parent?
As a parent, it's two different things. My kids are at two different schools now, because of their ages. One school, my oldest school, I will say, is doing an excellent job. They have had statements and conversations about racial injustice, about the murders of Breonna Taylor. She goes to an all-girls school, so of course they're talking about Breonna Taylor, where we don't really hear her name as much, and making space for that. They're also making space for just what this looks like in terms of stress and COVID. They're making their therapist available online for one-on-ones. So they're doing a lot of really good work. My youngest daughter's school is a religious school. And at times we know, depending upon how the church, that particular entity, processes what's happening in the world, impacts how much they deal with it. So it's more mask and, social distance, but not the stress of this situation. Not even like they're doing the full uniform. You must be in your full uniform. Where the oldest daughter's school, they ended up saying, you know what, this is hard enough. Don't be in your pajamas. That's all we ask, because this is different and this is hard, and we are not trying to make this more difficult. So the responses have been very different. One has been very much informed by their mental health team. The other one has been more not really responsive, and that one. So I process more with the younger one because no one's processing it with her.
That's helpful. That's helpful. And it's good actually for us to hear, maybe not so much as a parent, but good for us to hear, that even within the same home, different children, two different schools, dealing with two different ways. And even the notion of, depending on if you have multiple children at home, you being a parent who's in tune with what they are and are not discussing, so that you can fill in the gaps. And I think that leads us to that important piece as parents. I mean, part of our job as African-American parents in general, but I think particularly if our children attend a predominantly white school, is to fill in those gaps, gaps in the education of who we are as African Americans, the gaps in the education around cultural differences, right? I grew up in Pepper Pike. So, what my white friends did, my mother made very clear, you're not going to be doing that, right? So we get that. But talk to us about filling in emotional gaps. I hear you in terms of, talking to that one child more. Should we at some point maybe approach the school about that? Should we just keep that at home? What's your wisdom and thought on that piece?
Well, my husband says I'm not allowed to approach the school no more.
Okay. I
was like,
hey,
we're not gonna let you approach the school no more. Okay. I think at times I have, and that's why my husband says no. Okay. He was like, I'm going to send the email, but at times I have been very vocal around all needs, social,
Mm-hmm.
emotional, educational needs, that if I'm feeling like something is not happening for my child in that school district, I'm going to address it. But I also know that if you are not invested in that, I can tell you to do it. It doesn't mean that you're going to do it well or put thought into it. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that's more harmful.
Mm.
So part of it is, whether it's educationally, getting her a tutor, or emotionally kind of having those conversations about COVID, about racial justice stuff. She's been to protests with me. She's made signs when we didn't feel comfortable about her going. And we've had these conversations about what's happening in the world and what it means for them, specifically as Black girls. We've talked about conversations about push out, disproportionate discipline and how that's stressful, that people don't want Black girls to use their voices because they say it's intimidating and loud, and how frustrating. So we have those conversations because I do not want to also push those conversations and put them in the hands of people who don't buy into it, because how you frame it can be more harmful than you not talking about it at all.
Okay, that's good. That's good. So I want to talk a little bit more as we move into women. And the word that just kind of echoes in my spirit is capacity. We all have a capacity, physical capacity, social emotional capacity, all of that. As women, I feel like our capacities are stretched, and there's so many that part of the anxiety is there are so many demands and seemingly not enough capacity. How do you suggest we navigate? Because it seems like it's more than ever, but the bandwidth is not there. What's the conversation, Dr. Dent? What do we need to be talking about?
I think the first part of the conversation is recognizing that the expectations that are put on women, and even more specifically Black women, are unrealistic. And we've been living with the belief that we are supposed to live up to those expectations. And when we do not, it's causing us more stress. It's causing us to feel helpless. It's causing us to doubt ourselves. But the expectations that are put up on women, you can never meet them. And we try every moment of every day to do it. One of the things I wrote in one of my books is I called it the S word, because when you say something is the word, it's a cuss word, and it's selfish. Like when women take time for themselves, people call us selfish, and we say, no, I'm not selfish. I'm not. And then we try to manage and do everything for everybody else and keep it going, and knowing that we're running on fumes. And so one of the things I always tell women is that there's no way you can do everything. And sometimes I give you permission by saying, wow, that there's no way that can be accomplished. You don't even have enough hours of the day to make all these things happen, and to do them with joy, to do them with excellence. You just can't. And you also can't keep doing everything and running on fumes, because you're going to pass out. Like, if you don't take a moment, I always say God is going to like lay you down. You're going to be like, I'm so sick, because God said you ain't sitting down. I'm going to sit you down. But that's that piece of it. There's these unrealistic expectations, and we have to stop buying into the fact that we're supposed to do everything. I know when you talked about kind of those roles that you have, and it's like, yeah, you can both work full time, but let's look at what your day looks like when you come home. You're doing dinner, you're getting the kids ready for bed, you're doing these 50 million other things with not enough hours in the day. And now with homeschooling and not being stay-at-home parents, but working from home a lot of times, now trying to do 2 full-time jobs at the same time, and it's not possible, and you're not taking a break. So one of the things I say is you sometimes have to prioritize. Sometimes you have to realize everything can't be done with excellence. There's no work-life balance. Sometimes something gets 90, something gets 10. Because there's no such thing as 100% at everything. So in that, sometimes I've actually just been like, you know what, kids, go for what you know. There's cereal in there. There are some Eggo waffles. I just can't today. Sometimes the laundry's going to sit on the couch for 2 days, and I'm hoping somehow it just magically gets folded. But I can't do everything, and having to be okay with that. And women are never told you can be okay with that. We're praised for being strong. We are praised for doing it all. We are praised for being ride or die. We are not praised for taking care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And we have to be able to do that. And balance needs to look different. Balance is not 100% at everything. Balance is this day I'm going to cook a meal and I'm going to do all of this for the family, but the laundry ain't getting done.
Yeah.
This day I have to work on reports. I can't do the bedtime story like I wanted to. Honey, you have to tap in. Or unfortunately, they have bedtime stories that you can view online.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say this. It's okay. And we have to be okay with redefining balance, not allowing ourselves to fall into unrealistic expectations. And every now and then, being selfish is not a cuss word. It's the only way that you're going to be able to continue to survive.
That's good. Because one of the things as you were talking, I thought about was like Claire Huxtable, right? Like growing up, come on, your face. Claire Huxtable was this, I always noticed, lawyer by day, raising 5 kids, married to Heathcliff, never had rollers in her hair at night. Makeup was always right there, speaking English, speaking Spanish, always had the right words, the right wisdom. And the other piece became, and I'll speak for my home, I think that was also like hey, you better raise the bar to my own mother. And then those, in this book that I'm reading, Mastery of Self, he calls them domestications, and that they are that we are taught these, and he's talking about not just in the home, like all across, like these domestications of what is right, what is wrong. You talk about this, the expectations of what women should do. You need to cook, you need to do all of this. And he relates that to unconditional love versus conditional love. And I guess it's coming up for me because I'm reading the chapter right now on we sometimes put failure on ourselves when we do not meet the social domestications, the social expectations that a character, not a real person, a character. And I'm afraid that we're killing ourselves as Black women by living up to unrealistic expectations. How do we be gracious with ourselves? I hear you. You're right. Like comes a point. I can't do it all. And I've had to grow into telling Mr. Jenkins, you're going to have to do that laundry. That's what's going to have to happen. Like, I'm not sleeping one more night on the couch because I done worked a 12-hour day. This was early on in our marriage, not now. And now I'm going to be up all night going back and forth to do the laundry. But you have to recognize that this is not healthy. I guess that's the first question. How do we recognize these unhealthy practices that are contributing? And then how do we learn to voice our no? Because no is almost a cuss word in Black culture. You just said it. If I say I need some me time, that's selfish. How do we recognize that? How do we get the courage to see that? Does that only come in counseling? Does that come in other ways? I don't know.
I think the first part is sometimes the recognition, unfortunately, comes when there's a full breakdown of everything, where you just start finding out that nothing in your life is working because you're trying to do everything and everything is now sloppy.
My Lord. No, you're talking right. You're talking right.
And so then you begin to realize that you're not functioning anymore, that you're not holding it together. And unfortunately, that's usually when we figure it out. It's when there's some major breakdown where we end up not finishing that project for work and we get written up, or, we get called into the teacher or to the principal because our child's work isn't being done, or, your partner ends up making some comment to you that hurts your feelings and you're like about what you used to do and now you're not doing. So a lot of times it comes from impact of our failure to really be able to manage stuff that's unrealistic to try to manage in the first place. And then we start trying to figure out what do we need to do. I think that's where we struggle, because then our what do we need to do is going back to just, I just need to not sleep. I just need to not do this. Because we're raised that way.
Where there's a blessing in the pressing, which is the biggest, sometimes there is, but sometimes there's a blessing in the surrender too.
Absolutely. And I think that part of it is we need to give ourselves, like you said, the grace that we give everybody else. We as
Mm.
women have no expectation for anybody in our lives to do what we do. We
Mhm.
don't have, we'll tell our children, oh, you got a bunch of homework. Don't worry about the dishes. I'll do them.
Yeah.
Our partner is working on a big project for work. We're going to pick up dinner, or I'm going to cook, or whatever the case may be. We give so much grace to everybody else. And so sometimes we just need to begin to treat ourselves like we treat our children and our partners.
Yeah.
If they're not meeting that, what would we say to them? We would say, well, dinner ain't being cooked tonight. It's okay. I don't need you to do this for me. But we don't, as women, give ourselves grace. We are conditioned not to. We are
Mm.
praised when we don't.
Yeah.
We are denigrated when we do. And
Yeah.
so we also need women to also give other women permission, because we don't give
Mm.
each other permission. We will be the first ones to talk about you
Come
when
on.
it's all falling apart.
Come on.
So surrounding yourself with women who are also going to let you know there's no expectation that you do all of this, and who also give you permission to doubt your ability to do it, confirm that you can't, and then
Mm.
say, let's look at and prioritize to make sure that you're okay. And unfortunately, sometimes therapy is the first place that happens, because the person is there for you to be okay. They want nothing but you to be okay.
Yeah.
So there's not this ulterior motive of, which we see as Black women, where people say, you need to give up some stuff, but not the stuff I need you to do. And so it's the one place sometimes where we get to actually have someone who's processing with us, just for us, with no motive but for you to finally be okay.
So I think you're the perfect person to help us, particularly here at the end of this series, to really process. Different counselors have different approaches, different methodologies, right, that they approach with. But we historically, as Black people, have been very resistant to counseling. One of the things I hear is, I don't want my business in the street. And I'm like, girl, these are professionals. There is HIPAA. Folks will lose their license. You talk to us about, what are the protections that we get with the most basic counselor or psychologist that we go to see? What can we basically expect to happen and to take place?
I think the first thing is, we're talking licensed folks, because sometimes people will put themselves out as counselors and stuff like that.
So how do we distinguish? Do we ask? Tell us.
Yes.
Okay.
You do. Are you a licensed professional counselor? Are you a licensed social worker? Are you a licensed psychologist? Because people say stuff like, I'm a behavioral specialist, I'm a this, and there's not. The licensed folks are governed by ethical requirements and boards that you can report us to, and we can lose that license if we do not adhere to those standards. So one of the things, you always want to make sure the person is licensed. But as licensed individuals, we are required to keep confidentiality. Anything that we can't keep confidential, we are supposed to disclose to you in that first time we meet you. I keep your business, except in these circumstances.
Yeah.
The first one is, of course, if you give me a release of information to allow me to release your information, and we're clear on what I'm releasing, that's you giving me permission, which you can take away at any point in time. We also have to tell you that. And we also have to give you the limits to confidentiality. And we will tell you that in the beginning. I'm one of those therapists that also feels like, if we've been seeing each other for a while, and I feel you're going into an area that may be a limit to confidentiality, I'm going to say, hey, let's review this again. Before we move forward. But no, if I've had people where your spouse, when I was doing therapy in one city, spouse called, I just want to know if Timmy is seeing you. I'm sorry, and you are, And then I go into, let me explain to you. I don't even acknowledge if I've even seen the person. I then explain the rules.
Good.
Of disclosing of information. I can't tell you if I even know who you're talking about, but I can tell you our rules of disclosure, and I'll give you a basic information. I also make a point to tell people when they have partners, let's be clear. I'm not telling your partner anything. Even if your partner comes and says, well, she told me, I ain't telling nothing.
That's good.
I've seen clients out in the community. I've had a couple freak out on me, a couple of my teenagers, because they thought I was going to even speak to you. And I even tell you, I won't acknowledge your presence.
Yeah.
If you come up to me and say, hey, Dr. Dent, I'll respond. But me speaking to you and starting a conversation leaves you to have to explain to everybody how you know me and who I am.
That's good.
So we have those conversations, and I always encourage people to ask questions about, I don't want my business in the street. Let's talk about confidentiality and how that is not going to come from me. Let's talk about, even if we're at the same event, because that happens, especially when you're part of the Black community. I will, if we happen to be in a little group, I'm going to just say hi to everyone. But I also make a point to navigate myself away, not obviously, but just because you also deserve your space that doesn't include me. But yeah, those conversations have to happen. But if you're licensed, we can't tell your neighbors, and we can't go, my husband doesn't know about anything I do other than it's been a hard day.
Yeah.
And that's because I respect, even in those moments at home, that people are entrusting you with something that's very difficult to talk about. They're being vulnerable. And in that vulnerability, you deserve to know that it's safe to be that. And licensed people, we ain't posting your business on social media. We're not going to have, after you left the session and you 5 minutes after you left the session, we go, this was a rough one. And if they are, that's a problem, but that is not our field.
Yeah. Okay. That is really helpful, because I think, like I said, that there just really is a misconception. And also that I want to clarify, you're not in there talking to your girlfriend. My counselor gives me homework, which I hate. I looked the other day like, I got to do that homework for Dr. Ridley. I got to journal about these questions and these things. But it's true. And I want people to get, it's not even a paid venting session, although you may need to get some things out. It's not a girlfriend's, hey girl, what you think? I think the other thing people get confused about often is my counselor didn't tell me what to do. A lot of people think counseling is somebody just telling you what to do rather than digging under what do you feel you should do, or what are you called to do? And so I'm really glad that you shared that. I want to add those two pieces in, because those are recurring things that I hear from women. Let me ask this question, and then I want to get into some of the questions that are coming in from those who are watching. Do you find, and I have no clue about this, that as women get older, that they are more resistant? Do you find that younger generations are more open to counseling, older generations are not? Or is that just the perception I have that is not necessarily true? Because I don't know.
I think the current generation is more open because we have made it normal to express your feelings, to talk about counseling as an option. So I find that in this 20-something group, they are a little bit more open about, and I see a therapist, and I got to get off because I got to go to therapy. They seem to be a little bit more open. I am finding that more professional women are becoming more open to it as well. And those are the groups I see it the most, not just women who are in their 40s, but women who are heads, have reached this certain level in their careers, who are now becoming more open to it. Like, I got to go get my pedicure, then I got to go see my therapist, that it's all self-care, and they're beginning to frame it as self-care. And the younger generation looks at it as a resource, and they're more open to having a conversation.
Yeah, that was something we dealt with last week, as we talked about how typically it can be more difficult for people to ask for help the higher they climb in their career. But sometimes it is literally the managing of more that ought to, in my opinion, bring us in, as we venture through that. So people, are beginning to put some questions in the chat. If you have a question, go ahead and drop that in, and we'll do our best to answer them. We have a question from Alicia, who says that she can kind of see that her daughter, it's in two parts, so I'm kind of breaking it down here, seems to be seemingly slipping into some depression, is getting really quiet, has really stopped talking to her. And she just said, hey, I want to help my daughter, but how do I help another woman who may be slipping into depression and does not know it?
And I think
with an adult daughter, by the way, not a.
Okay. I think one of the things is saying what you see, because sometimes, because we've been taught to push through and that you only have what you can bear, that we think we're managing and we're handling it. And so sometimes it takes someone to actually just have that conversation. Like, I'm seeing these things in you. I know you're not okay. I think sometimes we'll do that. Let me know if you need anything. And we're not going to let you know. Or we say, are you okay? And our natural reaction, we always know, is to say, yeah, I'm great. So, you know, something is going on with you and I see it, and being able to identify what you see and beginning that conversation from that framework versus ignoring it, waiting for them to come to you, just asking like, I'm not sure, when you are very sure, because a lot of times the closest people to you are pointing out to you what's happening before you notice that they can see it. You may feel it, but you think you're still doing it. You're like, I still got it together. And they're like, no, you're up in the middle of the night. You're not eating like you used to. You know, they start pointing out these things to you where you're thinking that no one's noticing. And so sometimes it takes those close to you to have that conversation. But also when people are having those conversations, if you're thinking about therapy, I always say have some options before you have it, because then you leave it to them. And they're like, oh, I'll just figure it out. So sometimes I'll be like, hey, you know, and I looked up some therapists, you know, you may want to go talk to somebody, and kind of giving them that option too, but telling them what you see, because she may think that she's got it together. Okay.
Amen. And as you said that, it's so funny. I have a girlfriend right now who's going through a really tough time. And I promised myself I would not say, how are you doing? It's a dumb question. Like, I know they say there's no dumb questions. No, it's a dumb question. Like, I'm going through the valley of the shadow of death. I'm not doing great, you know, and so there are other ways that we can do that. And so thank you for that. The next question is, I have been a caregiver for the last 6 years, and I feel guilty doing for myself. What could I do to normalize self-care while being a caretaker?
I think one of the things is that it becomes a part of your routine, just like the care that you're giving to the person you're caring for. So if it's on Tuesday, I take them to, we'll say, physical therapy, I'm going to take my phone with me and I'm going to binge watch something while they're in physical therapy. When they are, you know, I'm not going to cook this day, I'm going to get us something to eat. I'm going to identify who are other supports that are available to assist me in caregiving. Because a lot of times in families specifically, you end up finding there's other relatives, but it's just you who are doing the day-to-day, and kind of saying, I think sometimes we, instead of saying, I can't do this all by myself, especially if there's other supports, even if they can't do it every day, even if it's, you know what, once a week, I need y'all 4 to figure it out. Y'all can take turns, but once a week, I'm going to be gone for 4 hours. And it doesn't matter if you go and sit in your car.
That's good.
You have to kind of put that in your schedule and make it a task, because your initial reaction is going to be guilt. And I can't make this time, when you have to make yourself make that time. But if there's other brothers, sisters, cousins who are going to post that one picture on social media with them, like, we here celebrating with Auntie, can you come once a month, once a week, something to spend some time with her? And I'll make it at a point in time where it's not where we're doing the bathing, caregiving, or whatever, but that it's a time when, you know, I know that she's resting or something on her schedule that you may feel uncomfortable doing. There's still work that you can do to assist you.
One of the things I hear is not only normalizing self-care, but normalizing asking for help, or just holding people accountable who should be sharing in this responsibility.
And I think that's that thing, is that reframe is important, where if our thing is, I don't want to ask for help, that makes it appear as if they're doing you a favor when they also have an obligation, versus identifying what task you can do, or I need you to do this. But it's that we feel like it's our responsibility, but there's others who it should also be their responsibility. And so we have to stop saying ask for help when it's actually sharing responsibility with others who should be helping to do it.
Yeah. And I want to kind of just chime this in. I don't know anything about this person's particular situation, but I want to say that I watched both of my parents, my mother and my father, take care of their parents, of their mothers. And in my case, my mother's parents were married. We have to remember that as parents, we are modeling this behavior, and that caretaking is not just a woman's job. I watched my father. I went with him on so many occasions, and my grandmother struggled with paranoid schizophrenia, and would be like, hey, we're going in here to take care of your grandmother. And if you see a roach or she serves you, I'll never forget, veg-all and calls it soup, you just smile and say thank you. But that notion is that sometimes we as parents, we don't even model that. And so we kind of talk about, we just continue to pass down those unrealistic expectations. Here's another one. It's a pretty deep question, but maybe you can give us a place to start. I would like to release pain inside of me that I've been holding all my life. And I don't know how to release it. So I know that's a big question, but where could someone start? Where's a good starting point for that?
I think one of the starting point is recognizing that it's pain that you need to be released. I think the next thing is oftentimes when we hold on to stuff that's uncomfortable, we're comfortable in that discomfort because there's something, what are we concerned about is going to happen when we release it?
My Lord.
And so part of it is you now realize I need to do something, which is that we talk about kind of pre-contemplation where you're like, no, it's good, versus contemplation where you're now like, I need to do something. Then we need to figure out, what are you worried is going to happen if you do? And then begin to develop strategies to deal with what that worst thing you think is going to happen. If you start talking about it, well, if this is the worst thing I think is going to happen, what supports do I need? What strategies do I need before I start the process of releasing this? Then we also predict that it's going to be hard and that I'm going to likely want to stop releasing this. So I'm going to predict that I'm going to probably backtrack. And when I backtrack, but I've now predicted it's going to happen. So it's not something that is so big. And I don't feel like a failure because I knew that there were going to be some things that were going to let me know, or people, because a lot of times when we are trying to release something, there are people who are invested in us not. And so, and that being the case, it's, if I know that I start to release this and there's going to be some people who are going to be invested in me not, who can I rely on for support to counteract the pushback that I'm going to experience. So I think that that's the thing, is you recognize it, you look at what you're fearing is going to be the worst outcome, prepare yourself for that with strategies, with people, predict that you're likely going to have pushback from it, and who are going to be your supports, who are going to hold you down against that pushback.
Yeah. And I think too, on a personal note, like this is where, I shared last week, like I've been in counseling for 9 years. And I feel like Dr. Ridley and I are like really getting into the stuff now, like all the stuff that's uncomfortable and make you got to walk with for a couple of weeks, and your childhood and your adulthood, and why you're repeating cycles and why you're tolerating the same stuff. So the other piece is I want to potentially say to this person is there is the release, but the healing comes with the processing.
Absolutely.
The release is ripping the Band-Aid off. This is, getting it out or however that, but there's a difference between release and healing.
Yes.
And ultimately what we want is that healing. So we start with the release, but we want to get to a place where pain doesn't become poison. pain moves us in a stronger direction.
And I think if you've been holding on to it for so long,
Mm-hmm.
this expectation that once you rip the Band-Aid off, things healing is going to be immediate. You've been living with this.
Yeah.
So if you've been living with something for years, the expectation that in a month things are going to be fine is not fair to yourself or your healing process.
True. One last question here. My abuser has returned home from prison, and as a result, I'm having flashbacks. My anxiety is at an all-time high.
Mm-hmm.
How do I reduce my anxiety?
I guess I think one of the things is I'm not sure in terms of when we're saying back home, if you mean back into the home or you mean back into the community, as in terms of home.
I'm fearful it means community.
Okay.
But we don't know, but let's just assume it's community.
Okay.
We're praying that that's the case. Right. We don't.
I think if the person is returning to your home community, I think one of the things I often tell people, especially survivors of abuse, even if you have been in counseling, we're fine, going back is okay.
They did say into community. They did clarify. Into community. Good.
That going back is okay, because there will be points in time that may increase the stress, and your abuser being released back to the community is definitely one of those. So whether you were in counseling before or have not, or not, this may be a time to also seek counseling. I think identifying who are the people around you who are a safety net for you, and kind of talking to them about what does this look like, because we also don't want you to now isolate yourself and say, I am now trapped in my home because I don't want to run across this person. So we don't want you to get back to isolating yourself. You may need to request a protective order if that's something that you feel you need. If they're on papers, you can always kind of make that one of the request that be one of their conditions, that they're not in the same space as you, but also understanding that this is not unexpected for you to have heightened fear. Post-traumatic stress disorder is real. A lot of times we are hypervigilant anyway, even when the person who's caused the trauma is not around, and now they are. So kind of experiencing those symptoms again is not uncommon. But yeah, I would definitely say go back to therapy. If we're looking at sexual abuse specifically, your local rape crisis center is free. They will also get an advocate to work with you if you're concerned about your actual physical safety, that they're going to come and do something to harm you again, versus your emotional safety. They will help you through that process as well. But it's not uncommon for you to begin to feel this heightened sense of anxiety and fear, and sometimes even anger, because that person is back out and you feel that they didn't need to be.
Thank you so much. You have just really blessed us tonight. Would y'all just help me clap it up? Give me your virtual claps, your emoji claps. Dr. Dent, we're so thankful that you would join us tonight. What a blessing. And I just really am thankful that you gave us tangible things that we can walk away with and apply. Let me give you a couple quick church announcements. Amen. It ain't a good Thursday night if you ain't got no church announcements. All right. So we want to remind you, first of all, that the Justice Ministry is launching its Elections Matter, You Matter vote campaign. You can prepare to vote early now. And this month, the Justice Ministry is willing to assist you with that. If you need a vote by mail ballot application, or want the Justice team to deliver your ballot application to the Board of Elections, you can come to the church on Tuesday, the 15th. That's next week, Tuesday the 22nd or Tuesday the 29th from 4 to 6, and they'll be here. And then you can also come on Sunday the 20th or Sunday the 27th and collect those from 2 to 3:30. They'll be here. We are having souls to the polls. We are, there are restrictions around delivering ballots on behalf of people. But anyway, we have souls to the polls, I believe October 11th and October 18th. Don't hold me on that. We'll let you know for sure. But we really want you to consider meeting us down there, where our goal is to get no less than 400 adults from South Euclid United Church of Christ to vote early early in the upcoming election. So if you want to vote with us, we will meet you down at the Board of Election on those Sundays after worship. And then we want to remind you that coming up is our outdoor worship experience. I'm going to throw up the banner right here. Let me remind you how this works. It's going to be our this is the only one we have planned right now. So it's not an every week kind of thing, y'all. Right now, on Sunday, October the 4th, that's my 12th wedding anniversary. I deserve a jewel and a crown. Hallelujah. At 11 a.m., we'll have worship here. It's going to stream live and be in the parking lot. Therefore, you must arrive by 9:45 a.m. The parking lot will close at 10:30. No exceptions. You're going to have to be here on time. Remember that your windows must remain up at all times. You do not need to wear your mask as long as you are remaining in your car, which you should. If for some emergency reason you have to exit your car, we do ask that you put on a mask. You must register. There are limited parking spaces. The link is on the screen. The numbers are going up on the registration, y'all. I believe in the next week or so, it is going to fill up and fill out. And so we invite you to come and to be with us. If in the event it rains, we will let you know by 8 a.m. that morning if the service is rescheduled. But our FM transmitter is going to be here. We're going to give you a station in your car. We're going to serve communion. Our deacons will be around to help and to assist. And we are just excited to worship with you on October the 4th, whether that is in our parking lot or that is online. These have been your church announcements. Don't forget, young people, register for the upcoming youth worship experiences. All you need to do, you or your parents, send an email to youth@southeucliducc.org, and we will register your child. Just let us know what grade and what age they are in, and we'll let you know when and where and how they meet. Those meetings are via Zoom, but this is their worship experience for kindergarten through 12th grade. They're in separate classes, so we invite you to that. And don't forget to register for Encore, which is similar to Echo. If you've enjoyed Echo, I think you will enjoy Encore, which is the follow-up again to Sunday's sermon, but it just happens in virtual small groups. Thank you again, Dr. Dent, so much. These folks, I didn't do it because I was giving all the church announcements, but they are clapping you up. And we are just so thankful for the ways that you have blessed us tonight and come through and hung out with us here at South Euclid United Church of Christ. Y'all, I love you. Take care. Be blessed. I've been on these virtual calls for the last 3 hours. I'm about to get up out of here and enjoy my weekend. Love you. I'll see you on Sunday. Sunday sermon is probably the most difficult one I've preached in this whole series. We're dealing with self-medicating versus medicating. It's going to be tight. It's going to be uncomfortable. And we all self-medicating in these COVID streets, but we going to talk about how to do it right. Hallelujah to Jesus. So come on and join us Sunday morning, 11 o'clock a.m. I would love to be with you and to speak into your life. I love you. Take care. Be blessed. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.